Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now today's another one of these videos where we take a look at a collection which has been amassed by a gentleman with a view to inspiring us perhaps to go on a certain direction or explore an avenue in life that we haven't gone down before. Now today I'm looking at a collection of wristwatches which have been provided for our sort of delectation by a gentleman called James. Now I met James just the other day at our Nirvana Club gathering which was held in the town of Northamptonshire here in the UK. James was wearing one of the watches we're about to talk about today. We discussed the watches in his collection and he offered to supply these images which will give us something to think about, something to talk about. You'll certainly get my observations from this. Now, by the way, if you're a gentleman who has a collection of wristwatches and you would like my observations and perhaps maybe inspire other gentlemen with what you have collected, drop them in. I'll put the email address on the screen. I would be delighted to hear from you. Now, what I can tell you about James, that he's a sparkling intellectual fellow and he enjoys his watches and his shoes. But what he's told us here, that I have had an interest in watches since I was a teenager and purchased my first watch, which was a Seiko quartz chronograph that I still own. Well done, James. I've still got my first watch as well. My first luxury watch purchase was an Omega Seamaster Diver 300, unsurprisingly influenced by my interest in James Bond and Casino Royale. Since then, I've owned a few different brands, including Tag Heuer, Tudor, Rolex and Grand Seiko, a few of which we're going to see here today. The first watch which he has provided for us to look at is what he describes as his favourite, and it is of course one of the big hitters, one of the most iconic and classic watches of all time. It is the Rolex Explorer, and the one we're looking at here is the 36mm, a 124270 contemporary modern version of this watch. And yeah, what can you say? James tells us it's probably my favourite watch, although some might consider it a little boring. I like that it's very versatile and flies under the radar. I've previously owned the 39mm version, which was my first ever Rolex watch and was purchased to mark 6 months in a new job. 6 months in a new job? Wow, you'll take any opportunity to purchase a watch to enjoy an anniversary, won't you? And I can't blame you for that. So what we are looking at is the classic, the modern version of that Rolex Explorer. And it is, well, everybody who enjoys wristwatches knows what this one looks like and knows what it's all about. Rolex introduced this watch in the mid-1950s and it has become, in essence, their field watch in their collection. A small, simple, elegant watch, time only, nothing special going on, black dial, white numerals with some baton markers in there as well, fitted with its classic oyster bracelet in fully stainless steel. A very, very classic and elegant watch. However, right there, I used to own one of these myself and I sold it in 2024, having owned it for 3 years, because I just found the watch a little too benign, boring's the wrong word, you know, I don't think any Rolex watches are boring, but I just found that it lacked the sparkle that I was looking for in a Rolex watch. I mean, it is so ordinary for me. I had to let it go and replace it with something which was more glamorous. Now, that's just my taste, says a bit about me more than anybody else. I absolutely appreciate James's observations. It is a very versatile watch. You can wear the Rolex Explorer when you're wearing your swimming trunks on the beach, or when you're wearing your best suit in the boardroom, or on your wedding day. Not many watches have that level of flexibility. Today, this watch is brutally expensive for what it is. £6,400 is what you would buy this for if you were to go into a Rolex shop today. But the good news is these are becoming increasingly available. I have seen a few of these Rolex Explorers in 36 available in the windows of Rolex stores here in the UK on my many travels around the country. I waited, I think when I ordered mine going back would be over 4 years ago now, I think I waited about a year for mine to be provided by the authorised dealer, because of course there was a great expansion in the interest of Rolex watches at that time. But I think the Explorer is a great watch. When you look back in time, you know, some of the great wearers, Ian Fleming wore this in many of images of him. Who was the other chap? David Attenborough, the famous naturalist. He wore an Explorer on his many expeditions around the world, and it's a great expedition watch, I think it is fair to say. A great one. I can understand why it's your favourite, because it is something you can wear every day, never get tired of. Moving on, a brand which is also very well regarded by watch enthusiasts, and what we're looking at here is the Grand Seiko SB GR261. And what James tells us, that he's been interested in Grand Seiko for a few years, but had always preferred their automatic movements to the spring drive, which is of course the one which everybody tends to be somewhat more interested in. This was a birthday present to myself and reminded me of a Seiko my dad once owned. The finishing of the watch is stunning, and I think it has a vintage look that I really enjoy. It's also on an aftermarket strap which pairs well with the heat blued second-hand and cream dial. So it's got a bit of a blue leather strap there. And I got to agree with what James says. For me, this looks like I wouldn't even say vintage. This looks like a never aging style. You know, it's got to go out of fashion to be vintage. I don't think this look on a watch has ever aged. What we have are beautiful sword style hands, baton hour markers, a nice clean dial. It does have a date window at the 3 o'clock. And as he says, a second hand which has been treated with heat to give it a blued metal effect. The cream dial, absolutely gorgeous. Now today this watch would cost you £4,350 if you were to buy it new from Grand Seiko, but it comes with a very solid, what they call a 3-day automatic movement, so basically 72 hours of power reserve. The size of the dial is what makes it perhaps most attractive to many, 39.5 millimeters. Now this means it's pretty much wearable by anybody. If you've got a smaller wrist, a larger wrist, this is going to look at home on your wrist. It's about 13 millimeters thick. It is merely though what Seiko describe as splash resistant. So you don't want to be taking this anywhere near the water. Hence, you can happily wear it on a leather strap because you're unlikely going to get it wet. For me, this is a classic gentleman's watch, what you could wear with a suit, what you could wear even more casually on a more casual leather strap, as we see presented here. In the guts of that watch lay a remarkable automatic movement finished to the very highest level, and it is a beautiful and stunning watch indeed, and one enviable, which I think any chap would wish to have. Cracking choice. Moving on, and now we're moving to another one of the big hitter manufacturers, Omega, and we see the Omega Aquaterra Shades Edition in the saffron coloured dial. It looks coppery, but saffron is what they call it, and what James tells us is this. This is in fact my 4th Omega that I've owned and my most recent purchase. But I didn't have an Omega in the collection for a few years before this. What really interests me is the master coaxial movement, which I think is probably the most practical movement in a modern day wristwatch. I had the opportunity to get this at 40% off retail price and was sold on the saffron dial as it offered some much needed colour to the collection. These are cracking watches, the Omega Aquaterras, and the shades are beautiful collection of colours. I actually tried on a bay green, exactly the same watch but in bay green sort of dial, and it was glorious. 38mm diameter means even more wearable than the Grand Seiko. I think the 38 is the sweet spot in a dial diameter for a man's watch. It suits men of smaller wrists and men of larger wrists indeed. Only 55 hours power reserve, which is a little bit behind what you would expect in the marketplace these days. But don't forget that master coaxial movement inside, which you can see through the case back is a remarkable movement and considered to be absolutely one of the best on the market today. 12.3 millimeters thick, 150 meters of water resistance in this watch. I was extremely impressed when I tried this one on in the green dial variation. I like the saffron as well. Adds a lot of colour, lots of interest to this piece. £6,200 at full price, but as ever, with Omega, you can get in there, you can negotiate, you can haggle. They want to sell these watches. They're making them in large volumes. If you get the right authorised dealer on the right day, if they're motivated, you go for the jugular. 40% off is a great discount. I mean, I would expect 20 to 25%, but 40%, you obviously had them over a barrel that day, and what a winner. Winner, winner all day long. What a cracking face. A beautiful dial here with the sort of elongated triangles as hour markers, and the date window at the 6 o'clock makes this an interesting and attractive watch, and I would own one tomorrow. In fact, if I was to go out today and look for a one watch does it all, it would quite potentially be the Aquaterra, because it's a watch 150 meters of water resistance. This is virtually a dive watch. You know, you can take, it's called a Seamaster, Aquaterra Seamaster. You can take it in the sea, no worries at all. Again though, with that nice, excuse me, rather attractive bracelet they come with, it's a, you know, a wedding watch, a boardroom watch, an office watch. It's got it all covered. Omega did a great job with these, and yeah, they've done a, you know, I'm very impressed. And this is a good watch to have in the collection for just your everyday wearer. Moving on, the watch which is often compared to the Aquaterra as the one watch and done is of course the Rolex Datejust. And what we see here is the Datejust in 36mm, reference number 126234, with a bright blue dial. Now, I'm wearing one, right? This is the watch which I wear very, very frequently. Exactly the same watch, slightly older, because mine has got the old continuous bracelet on it with no clasp. But, you know, what a watch. What a watch from the pantheon of famous watches in the world today. What does James tell us? I purchased this watch after seeing it in a local jewellery store. The first week shops had reopened after the third lockdown in April 21. 2 days prior, I'd been in and put my name down on the list for the Explorer, which we now know he owns, which I received the next month, so he waited 1 month. Again, like the Explorer, I like the versatility, but it feels more dressed up with the fluted bezel and the Jubilee bracelet. Now, what I would say, if you're going to buy a Datejust, he's gone down the route that I would recommend anybody does, and that is fluted bezel opposed to the smooth bezel. If you're buying a Datejust, you've got to have the fluted. That's what it's all about. And the Jubilee bracelet, obviously they also come in the Oyster bracelet, but never forget the Jubilee bracelet, that famous bracelet, was created specifically for the Datejust when it was brought into service in the, I think it was the mid-1940s. So really and truly, I think if you're buying a Datejust, you should be looking towards at least the Jubilee bracelet and certainly the fluted bezel. Then you own a wristwatch icon, right? I think those who maybe go for other variations on the Datejust, for good reason, it's not quite the same experience. But here, the classic, in the classic size, 36mm. Actually, I find that the Datejust wears a little larger because it's quite a chunky and robust Oyster case, so they are quite robust. About 70, well, we've got 70 hours power reserve in the current Datejust. Mine's an older model, so only about 40 hours, 48 hours, something like that. 12.3mm thick, 100 meters of water resistance. So it's falling 50 meters short than the Aquaterra. What the Datejust does have though, if you buy the Rollersaw version, which is the fluted bezel, is that you have the inclusion of precious metals here, because the fluted bezel is actually made of white gold. So it's a little bit more, as James says, dressy, a little bit more fancy. The movement is not that, you know, master sort of coaxial movement that you get in the Omega. What you do get though is a COSC certified movement, which is kind of guaranteed to -2 to +2 seconds per day. So a very accurate chronometer, certified chronometer movement, but you pay for it, all right? £8,100 at the current catalogue price. I paid £2,000 less for that when I bought mine 5 or 6 years ago, so they are going up. But unlike the Omega, you are not going to be able to haggle with the authorised dealer. Famously, Rolex have no truck with negotiation. But I think what you get is a watch which could be a one and done. I wear this watch every day up in the woods. I wore it in London the other day when I went out for dinner in Claridge's. I wore it, you know, when I was getting on with my daily life. This is definitely a one and done watch, which can be compared to the Aqua Terra, but with the £2,000 price difference, it's hard to argue for the Rolex unless you love Rolex watches. But the bright blue dial is glamorous. I've got one on myself, and the sort of sunburst effect catches the light and it looks magnificent. This is a very enviable dressing up watch, special occasions, weddings, things like that. It's a cracker, worth having in the collection, and it's a keeper. This is the last watch that I would ever part with from my collection. So moving on, stepping away from the very expensive pieces, what we have here is very much a daily wearer, the Hamilton Khaki Automatic. And James tells us this wasn't a watch that I had considered until I watched a video by the Urban Gentry and was drawn to the vintage military style. And that is what this watch is all about. Hamilton used to be a contractor for the military, producing watches, and this watch screams military field watch to me, 100% all day long. This is a utility, functional, practical watch. £640 full price. This is a negotiable watch. Get in there, do a bit of haggling. I'm sure you can get that 40 quid off, if nothing else, maybe more. Aim for more. But what you get is a lot of watch, even at full price. 80 hours of power reserve with that automatic watch. 38 millimeters. Fits everybody. Classic and elegant. 11.5 millimeters thick. Slips under the old cuff of anything that you're wearing. And 100 meters of water resistance. Put them statistics all together, and what you get is a really brutally capable everyday wearing field watch. It's got a date window at the 3 o'clock, and as you can see, you know, big, easily visible hour markings with the 24-hour markings on the inner track. Black dial makes it easy to see in sunlight. Lots of luminescence in there. You can see it in the dark. You know, for my money, and I don't own one, but I would. For my money, this is perhaps the best value for money practical field utility watch on the market today, because you've got the solidity of the Hamilton brand. This is not rubbish. This is a great watch manufacturer, and this is a fabulous watch. And if I were planning an expedition anywhere in the world, and I wanted a watch, if I wanted to kit out the guys in my expedition with a watch that could take on pretty much anything, this would be the watch that I went for, because I think it just ticks all of the boxes. Sapphire crystal, it's got the full Monty. You know, this is a watch which will go up the Amazon, down the Nile, to the North Pole, the South Pole. This is the one that you can wear. And to be honest, its appearance, the aesthetic of this, I think you can get away with it. You put a nice strap on it, and it's a watch that you could wear, you know, maybe with a suit, no trouble. It has that look to it. And the last watch in the collection, and I'm guessing you've been looking at these, and often people will say, well, you want a dress watch. Maybe we've seen that in the Seiko. Maybe you want a daily wearer. We've seen many of those. What's missing? An out-and-out diver. And here it is. It is the Seiko Prospex SPB 143. And James says, I purchased this to fill the diver watch gap in my collection after I'd sold my Rolex Submariner. And a Seiko diver seems to be an almost mandatory requirement of a collection. It's a reinterpretation of Seiko's first diver watch, the 62 MAS, although a leather strap isn't a conventional choice for a watch of this nature. The closest this watch will get to water is the kitchen sink, so it's not an issue for me. And what a classic looking diver. The history of this watch dates right back to 1965 when it was the first Seiko diver's watch, and it was introduced really to sort of grab the attention of actual divers and adventure enthusiasts. And since then, Seiko has become kind of synonymous with making reliable, rugged, tough sports watches, which are not too expensive, so you can wear them with abandon. Now, this one is not cheap. £1,150 if you were to pay full price. Again, Seiko, go for the throat, get those prices down, get it under £1,000 if you're negotiating in a shop. That's what I'd go for. But you get a lot of watch for your money. You get 70 hours of power reserve with this piece. Don't forget, it's an automatic watch. It's a Seiko movement inside. Seiko is a, what do they call it, a vertically integrated company, everything under one roof, you know, so they're very good at making these pieces. It is a 40.5 millimeter diameter case, so not terribly large. A little bit smaller than the current Rolex Submariner, so if you don't like big chunky watches, this is a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact, but it still has that look. 13.2 millimeters thick. It's got a bit of heft to it. It's not a lightweight by any regard. Its movement will provide you plus 25 seconds to minus 15 seconds of accuracy per day. Now, if you're remembering what I just said about Rolex, plus minus 2 seconds a day, you're going to say, isn't that awful? Not at all. We live in the real world. Unless you are setting your watch at the inset from, you know, some sort of atomic clock which has pinpoint accuracy, you are not going to notice the difference, believe me. So don't be put off by these higher tolerances when it comes to accuracy. Now, this watch, even though it dates its sort of heritage back to 1965, it looks classy and sharp and ultimately wearable today. Of course, it looks very similar in appearance to the Rolex Submariner, as many dive watches do. It's got that black inset within the movable bezel, so you can set your dive time, let yourself know how long you're down for. Large baton hour markers which are filled with luminescence. You can see the time. The handset is filled with luminescence. In low light temperatures, or presumably underwater, you can glance at your watch and see the time easily. It's got a date, of course, at the 3 o'clock. Slightly small date for my eye. For me, with my failing eyesight, as I'm in my mid-50s, date windows on divers seem a little bit superfluous because you're never going to be timing your dive using a date. But there we go. I know they're more practical to have a date on there. And a nice big 200 meters water resistance means that you have a watch which you can wear in any situation you like. I really like it. And I think, you know, get it at a good price. This is a dive watch you can wear all of the time. Not worry about it. Unlike perhaps if you were wearing a Rolex Submariner, you would have a tendency to baby it somewhat because they are so close to 10 grand these days. But this watch, you know, you can get 10 of these for the price of a sub, and you can wear it without any worries at all. And Seiko is not a shabby brand at all. In fact, one would argue, I think they are on trend. I really like it. And what a cracking little collection that James has offered for us today with these 6 watches. You know, he's got lots of daily wearers. He's got that Rolex Datejust. He's got that Rolex Explorer, the Aquaterra. You know, you can wear any of those all day, not worry about it. If you're going full-blooded utility, you've got that Hamilton Khaki automatic, which is the ultimate field watch, let's be honest. And it looks great on the eye as well. A little bit smarter, you've got the Grand Seiko. Classic lines, beautiful look. And when you're getting wet, well, that Seiko Prospex, take on the elements and laugh, I think. I think it's a cracking little collection. Now, if I were to suggest something to add to it, I don't really know. What I would say that you are missing here, there's a lot of watches which don't have many complications. In fact, you know, other than time and date, that's all we have here. Have you thought about perhaps looking down the route of bringing something in, maybe like a GMT? A Rolex GMT, I know they're hard to get, but they are a good practical size and highly wearable. Or maybe even the Grand Seiko GMT. Bit smaller, bit more classy, beautiful dial variations available. Very nice indeed. I think it might suit your aesthetic, having met you in person. I think that Grand Seiko GMT might be something which could catch your eye. Very, very nice collection. Thank you for sharing it with me, James. And it was lovely to meet you in person and chat about watches and to take a very good look at your Grand Seiko, which was very, very beautiful. So gentlemen, there we go. I hope this conversation around James's collection has inspired you. If you have a watch collection that you would like me to look at you in my Rate My Watch series of videos, send me those images, email on the screen now, and I'd be delighted to give you my feedback and my thoughts as we go forward. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it, subscribe for more. If you want to come on the journey with me as a member of the Chap's Guide community, of course you can become a patron, the link to which is in the show notes below. You will get the extra videos that I make exclusively for my patrons each week and be the first to know about the meetups, like where I met James, and I'd be delighted to have you along. So, until the next time folks, take care, wear your watches with pride and passion, and I'll see you again very soon.